Welcome back, everyone, to 2022. Welcome to the Retro Chat podcast. I'm Andy Evans, and joining me to my right is my former tag team partner from Two Men and Their Mics. Yes, it did exist, believe it or not. We did have a show. We still do, technically. We've never actually finished the show, so it's still there. It's just on a break. It's Jason T. Dempsey. Jace, how you doing, my friend?
It's been a long year, hasn't it?
Well, yes. Do you know that next month will be 1 year since we did a two-man show?
Yes, I did know that, which is exactly why I said it's been a hell of a year, isn't it?
Yeah, it really has. It really has.
Actually, to be honest, I'm blagging that one. I didn't have a clue that it was that close to being a year. But let's be fair, with everything that was going on last year, it's not a surprise that it's been that long.
No, it's not. But, you know, we're back now doing a retro chat, not a two men, doing a retro chat podcast, the new project. Now, I just want to put it out there that we never actually finished Two Men and Their Mics. We never closed it down. And I am still trying to convince this dude to come back and do some. The fact that I've got him here now is because of the fact that I don't quite know how I've managed to do it. I think it's because we're talking about Spider-Man. That's how I've managed to do it. But if you want Jason to come back, please let him know. His Twitter handle is at the bottom of his name. Tell him to come back and do some more Two Men and Their Mics or retro chat. This is right up your alley, mate.
Yeah, to be fair, I can't imagine this is going to be the only time that I'm going to do this with you in the first place. To be honest, I'll get that straight out there. It's not a case of not wanting to do these things. As we know, this past year has just been mental. My little girl's come into her own. She's become quite a character, as I'm sure you can imagine, being my daughter, and subject to my moods all the time. It's quite an interesting one. But between work, between numerous different strains of COVID, this, that, and the other, restrictions, just generally everything that can happen has happened this past year. I've moved, obviously, that's a long story, but it's been crazy, and I'm not gonna lie, the time just hasn't been there. So, like I said, it's not a case of not wanting to do these things. I've had to take a sabbatical from other projects as well. At the same time, I mean, as you know, I used to write a column for the Real Wrestling website, and it's been around about the same time since I've done a column for them. It's about a year or so. So I am already working on reintegrating myself into that ecosystem. So I can't see it being too long before I start doing other things as well. So watch this space. That's all I'm going to say.
Wow, fantastic. Well, it'll be good to have you back doing a show. In fact, before we do that, let's just give you some updates on a couple of things that are coming up over the next few weeks. So you may have noticed that we are live right now. Haven't done a live show for quite a long time, but we are live and exclusive, right, on Facebook and on Twitch and on YouTube. And in a couple of weeks, we'll be going into other places. However, we do have some shows that have been announced. So in 2 weeks' time, right here on a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, we're going to be looking back at the 1992 Royal Rumble match, which we're calling a Flair for the Gold, because obviously that was Ric Flair winning the WWF Championship, spoiler alert, in the Royal Rumble match itself. That's Flair for the Gold. The following week, I'm actually going to be joined by, I know one person, and I'm looking for another one, because we're going to be doing the Retro Chat debate. And it's which is the greatest, or who is the greatest wrestling manager? Jim Cornette versus Bobby the Brain Heenan. And the reason I'm saying that is because one of your fellow contributors on Real Wrestling, Peanut, is going to be on the show and will be defending one of those two managers. So join us for that. More details coming up on social media and on the Discord for the MOS network. Check it out. But what do you think about that? A couple of good shows coming up in the next few weeks, aren't there?
Absolutely. I'm intrigued as to see who Peanut's supporting in that one, to be honest.
Well, I know, but I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. Head of Steel is watching us now on Twitch. He's just said, hello, fellas. Hello, Head. How you doing? Hope you're all doing good. Before we get on to our topic for today, let's give you some shout outs. If you want to get in contact with us right here on social media, you can do. All you need to do is head to Instagram and Facebook and Twitch and search for Retro Chat Podcast. Tweet us at Retro Chat Pod, and then subscribe on all the main podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, TuneIn, Pandora, anything else that's got a radio in it. Subscribe, listen, and you get the latest shows available. Plus, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, which is Retro Chat Podcast UK, you will get all of our back catalogue plus some extra bits and pieces that I found from the archives, Jay.
Do I want to know?
No.
Come on, enlighten me. Are there any horror stories?
There's no horror stories, but there's some classic UPW action that didn't realize we still had the footage for. So yeah, we got some classic UPW footage. We got the live stream. We got Quiz Night Live, which you can still play and still donate to. We got Promotion Wars, which is booking AEW. Haven't really got very far in that. Again, because I'm just not very good at that type of thing. And then we got everything else. Short tracks, retro play, you name it. So yeah, check it out. There we go. Now, today's topic, it is a big one because we are going to be talking about Spider-Man Far From Home. Is it the best MCU movie that's been released to date? So let's kick it off, Jay. I mean, you are quite possibly the biggest fan of Marvel, DC, comic books, the whole genre. I mean, just look at the man cave behind you in the new place. What were your thoughts? What did you think of No Way Home to kick us off?
I'm assuming we're going completely spoilerific on this one.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Let's make that clear right from the outset. The film was released on December 17th here in December the 15th here in the UK, 17th in the US. I did only actually get to see it the day after Boxing Day. I got forgotten about. So, I knew that'd get a reaction. So I went to see it on the Tuesday. Cracking film. I avoided all spoilers. I was completely spoiler-free when I saw that.
How did you maintain any kind of social media presence and actually avoid spoilers?
Because for once, people were actually really good. They were just putting, did you see this and did you see that? Or I was just looking at the right people or just not on social media that much.
I'd go with the latter because, I mean, seriously, I literally logged into my phone the Wednesday morning because it came out on the Wednesday. I logged into my phone Wednesday morning. I pulled down my drop down and there was a spoiler right in front of my face. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You know,
but you saw it on release, didn't you? You saw it at midnight. Yeah.
No, not midnight. No.
Didn't you? You saw it the following night?
I saw it on the Wednesday evening. Yeah. A friend of mine managed to get us tickets, and believe me, it was very short notice. We were sat right at the front of the cinema, and as you know, if you're right at the front, you are watching the movie like this.
Yeah, you got neck ache.
The difficult thing about it as well was we were not right in the corner, but far enough over to one side that we were just literally like that. And I'm not even joking that there's quite a few web slinging scenes at the beginning of the movie because it picks up right where the previous one left off. And I am not going to lie, there was some vertigo going on at that point in time because my eyes couldn't see anything else, and it was as good as being there. It was really, really, really disconcerting.
I bet. I mean, well, let's kick it off. What did you think of it? I mean, you said the film starts straight after the end of Far From Home, which was a cracking, film at that point anyway, and was up there in terms of the Spider-Man films. We had that reveal by J. Jonah Jameson and from Mysterio that Spider-Man was Peter Parker the first time it had been unveiled, and the look from Tom Holland and the way the public just turned against him at that point. Take us through it. Tell us what you think.
One of my favorite things about Far From Home, I think it was, I get confused with all the homes. The previous iteration of Far From Home. The biggest hook for me for the next movie was that end scene where it's J. Jonah Jameson, played by the same fella. I can't remember his name for the life of me at the moment, but he's Commissioner Gordon from Batman, the Snyderverse version. Same guy that played him during the Tobey Maguire era, obviously. I should know his name. I don't.
You really should.
But
I'm not fact checking you. I'm going to let you struggle.
No, that's fine. You carry on. So yeah, that was a big hook for me. Now I don't hold Far From Home in quite as high esteem as what other people do. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, but I didn't find it mind blowing. And I think the problem with that was coming out of Endgame. There was this massive, this huge high from what we'd just seen before between, the Infinity War and Endgame. Obviously, we had a few in between them to break it up. I think it was Ant-Man 2 and Captain Marvel, but Endgame was the big one. That was really that was the final chapter for the cinematic universe as it was then, with Spider-Man kind of attached as a bit of an epilogue. So I think by that point, my mindset was very much this is a closing movie. All I'm really interested in is seeing the fallout from what's come before. And we had snippets of that. I mean, let's be fair, we didn't get to the meat and the potatoes of what went on with the blip and all of that until we started looking into the TV shows, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, all of those. But as I said, I think that affected my viewpoint going into that movie. There was all the murals of Iron Man and everything. And Tom Holland, Peter Parker, was still recovering from the death of Iron Man. And yeah, for me, I was far more invested in what's happening next rather than, this is a Spider-Man story. So the hook for me, the really big change to the status quo came with that end reveal and Peter with his hands on his head going, what the, just as it finishes, you know what I mean? So for the third movie, No Way Home, to begin rather exactly where the previous one ended, I thought was fantastic. The funny thing is, it was also for me the slowest part of the movie. So
just picking that up from where you were there, I think you kind of hit the nail right on the head then, because I think No Way Home was quite a slow burn. It really did kind of build itself gradually, and it was more of a coming of age story, really, for Peter Parker, kind of embracing that superhero mantra that he was moving into, that Tony Stark was kind of giving him the responsibility for back in the Avengers. Just before we carry on, J.K. Simmons, courtesy of Head of Steel, he think that's the guy who played J. Jonah Jameson.
I owe myself a slap for not knowing that, seriously.
I'm
putting it down to stage fright. It's been a long time since I've done one of these.
That's a fair point. Yeah, it has been. Yeah. But you were shaking your head in disagreement with me there, which I kind of come to expect now, doing a show like with you.
No, not disagreement. I think more in consideration of what you were saying, to be fair. There's a lot that I want to build towards in regards to what you were saying just then. There's a lot that I want to build towards because my feelings throughout the movie shifted. I'm not going to lie, they did. They changed and they turned and they twisted. Now, it's no secret to anybody that my thing, what if stories, the multiverse, alternate realities, it spans everything that I'm into. We talked at length in the past about Star Trek. I love the mirror universe simply because I like people to be something that they're not necessarily in the here and now. Marvel's What If series, although I found it, I've got to be honest, a little bit disappointing. I did also still enjoy it. I think the reason for the disappointment was how lofty my hopes were for it after having been an avid reader of the What If comic books, and the fact that it stuck rigidly to the cinematic universe, which we are also we're kind of finding that out why now in regards to that. But yeah, the multiverse side of things has always been my thing. So when it became apparent that WandaVision, Spider-Man, and then Doctor Strange 2 were going to become a trilogy of sorts that's focusing on the multiverse and everything, that really, really, really piqued my interest. Obviously, again, there's a hell of a lot to take from the movie in regards to the multiverse, and we'll get to that as we discuss, what went on in the film and everything. But yeah, because of that investment in what was coming up next, I did find the beginning very slow.
I would agree. I mean, there were some great comedic moments at the beginning. Especially when he's swinging. When he's swinging with Zendaya, and she looks like she's about to vomit. I mean, that was just absolutely hilarious. And then going into the subway and all the way through and avoiding the train, ending up at Aunt May's apartment, and you see her and Happy in there, and he was far from happy in that segment. But it was just you were sat there laughing. It was really comedic, which, let's be frank, some of the Marvel films haven't had that, unless you've been Guardians or Thor Ragnarok, and maybe some of the Iron Men. Some of them have been quite serious.
I'd say they're in the minority. One of the few that I could think of would be Thor: The Dark World, which I thought was a little bit too serious. Civil War was quite serious. It had a few jokes here and there, but then the subject matter didn't lend itself to, like a quasi-comedy.
Yeah.
So that's totally, in that respect, forgivable. Spider-Man, if there wasn't any humor, I think people would be very, very disappointed. As if you've ever read a Spider-Man comic book, they are full of it, left, right, and centre. The quips, the wisecracks, the interplay between the characters, often hero and villain. It's a mile a minute. And again, if you didn't get that in the movies, then they wouldn't be true to the character that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are supposed to be. So it had to be there. It had to be there. But kudos to Tom Holland. I mean, one of the first things I said to the person I was at the cinema with was, "My God, the boy's bulked up a bit." When he's there with his top off in the bedroom, again with MJ. I was going to say Mary Jane, but it's Michelle Jones. Let's not forget that.
Yeah. That's picked up quite a few times in that film. Quite a few times that's referenced.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll get to it.
It's the first time in the series that they referenced the surname being Watson.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that was interesting. But I found the beginning slow. It started picking up pace a little bit for me, obviously, with the introduction of Doctor Strange and everything else. But I do have to be very, very honest and say that from about 15, 20 minutes in, when we got through that scene that continued straight on from the previous movie, that was when I really started getting into it, for sure.
It's one of those telltale signs when you go see a film and you're in an auditorium and you're in a theatre and the whole room starts belly laughing, and there were moments, especially when they went to meet Doctor Strange and Wong comes in from the Arctic, and you walk in and it's just like an ice palace, and that's it. And the interaction between him and Benedict Cumberbatch is quality. I mean, it's gold, and you can't help but belly laugh for it. And then the bit where they're talking about reversing time, and he said, have you called them? Have you spoke to them? No.
Yeah. But the thing is, as well, that's not just solid interplay between the characters. That's also very good writing, because let's be fair, Peter Parker's meant to be, 18 at this point? 18, 19 maybe?
Yeah.
You wouldn't think of the most basic option. You would overcomplicate matters.
No, and he says that in the film, though, doesn't he? So I keep forgetting you're a kid, But it's just, it's one of those things. I think watching it as a 40-year-old and watching a 17, 18-year-old in that situation, you're going, actually, would I pick up the phone and ring someone? No, I don't think I would. I'd FaceTime them if I
had to. You go along and you make mistakes.
Swing the seat of your pants, type of thing.
Literally.
Yeah, literally, yeah, absolutely. But at this point, you're right. At this point, I mean, I was invested 5 minutes into the film. I wasn't. It was a slow burn, but I was still invested all the way through. At this point, though, I'm sat at the edge of the seat, going, "What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next?" You had a feeling something was about to happen.
So we knew from all the promotional material. If anybody followed the trailers, and let's be fair, trailers are pretty crap these days in the amount that they give away. There is a lot of material that is given out on these trailers these days, and one of the things that we were 100% sure on was the villains that were appearing. We knew about that. And that, for me, is one of the hooks and one of the things I think that made me so impatient at the beginning of the movie. Because we know these guys are appearing in the movie. We know that you've got your Dr. Octopus, your Doc Ock. We know you've got the Green Goblin, Sandman, Electro. I'm missing a lizard. I was missing the lizard. So yeah, you've got all these guys showing up. You don't know how. You don't know what the situation is. You don't know what kind of a part they've got in this movie. So to me, that was what really nurtured my impatience. I was eager to find out what was going on. A little too eager, probably, because it means I probably didn't enjoy it to the extent I should have taken it for what it is at the time. But I'm an intrinsically impatient person, so it is what it is. One of the things I want to pick you up on is what you said about audiences with belly laughing and so forth and whatnot. Belly laughing was only the half of it. I mean, I obviously saw it on release day, so the amount of spoilers that were being seen and the amount of spoilers that were out there in the wild were few and far between, enough that I caught one, as I said, that very morning. But there were two specific guest appearances who you've shown in the pictures, which we're looking at now, from Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, that nobody really had any idea about. Everybody knew the rumors. Everybody knew the idea of the multiverse and everything else. Nobody knew for sure if these guys were going to be in it. It was kept wonderfully quiet. Andrew Garfield lied through his teeth in numerous interviews, which was great. I mean, the guy's an actor anyway, so you're not really going to catch him out. But yeah, when those appearances happened in the showing that I went to, I mean, the noise was incredible. You might as well have been at a theatre show. It was outstanding. Applause, cheers, whooping in the audience, everything. You name it, it was there. And it was such an electric atmosphere. It was unreal.
It rivaled really to Endgame, didn't it? Because you and I went to see Endgame and we saw it on premiere night at midnight in a packed cinema. And we both remember, speaking for you, the moment when Tony Stark died and the fact you could hear weeping in that cinema.
Forget the moment that Tony Stark died. What about Steve Rogers lifting Mjolnir up? I mean, that was, pardon the pun,
yeah, all right,
electric.
Just ask Jamie Foxx. But absolutely. But when let's go back to Tony Stark, when he died in the funeral, I mean, I remember looking at you looked at me, and we both could hear somebody a few rows back verbally weeping, like really crying, because that's the impact these characters have on you.
Well, a lot of people, keep in mind, I mean, this has been going since 2009. It is now 2022, 2021 when the movie came out, obviously. A lot of people have grown up with these characters. I mean, I'm talking about Spider-Man here, not necessarily Endgame. Endgame came out quite a few years ago now. But even then...
Not that long.
I mean,
not that long. Came out 2019. Yeah, 2019.
So you were talking even then, there's a decade of these characters at this point. So, a lot of people, if you saw Iron Man when you were 10, you're 19 now. If you saw Iron Man when you were 13, well, then you're 23. So, that's a significant investment. The Harry Potter films were very clever in what they did with that, in the fact that, the first film was very much for children. By the time you made it through to the end, they were a lot darker, they were a lot more gothic, and they were a lot more serious. They moved on with the audience that they were targeted at. which I thought was absolutely fantastic. And you know, the Avengers movies, the Marvel movies, are no different in that respect. You become invested in the relationships, the stories, and the characters themselves. So obviously, the more you know these characters, the bigger the emotional pull when something happens. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to go out and say it right now that we had a really, really poignant example of that in Spider-Man No Way Home. You know, let's be fair, we are doing spoiler warning. We are cutting through the spoilers, so to speak.
Oh
We
yeah.
are full disclosure. Aunt May.
Oh, that was that. I will admit I didn't cry, but I got a little bit teary eyed.
Oh, I shed a tear over that one.
Beautifully done, though,
Absolutely
wasn't it?
did. Hey,
Beautifully done, beautifully shot and acted by both of them. And the fact that that line, with great power comes great responsibility, which is thread throughout every Spider-Man film
except
since
these
Tobey
ones.
Maguire days,
Except these ones.
until now.
Yeah.
And there's that scene when he says it and then Maguire finishes it.
Yeah.
You know, afterwards.
Because that was
Oh,
the hook. That was the
yeah.
hook for the character in that, you know, because obviously he's like, you know, you guys don't belong here, just go away. You don't know what I'm going through. But actually, yeah, you know what? We do know what you're going through. So, you know, we've been there, we've done it already. This is nothing new.
Yeah.
And
But
that was
yeah.
wonderful. So that scene, that initial scene, which brought all three characters together, was absolutely masterful in the way it was executed. I think, and I'm not shy about saying this. I don't know if we've discussed this on one of the previous Two Men and Their Mics episodes or not, but I've always been a big Andrew Garfield fan.
No, you've
Always
never
been.
said that.
Oh yeah, I'd take them over the Tobey Maguire ones any day. Probably because I'm a little more prone to enjoying my darker stuff.
Mm.
The things with a bit more bite to them, you know, no pun intended against spider bites and whatnot. But yeah, I've always really, really appreciated the Garfield movies. I loved the first one. The second one, I have a love-hate relationship with. I
Mm.
didn't love it at all when I first saw it. It had its moments. Jesus, the Gwen Stacy bit killed me. No pun
Mm.
intended again.
Mm.
But yeah, it really, really, really got me. That did. But the film as a whole, I thought in places was rather forgettable. I didn't like the portrayal of Electro, and you know, yeah. But Garfield as an actor, easily, including Tom Holland, my favorite iteration of the character.
See, that's really interesting because I watched Amazing Spider-Man, the first one, and I didn't rate him. Didn't think he was any good. Didn't rate the character. Didn't rate the film. Obviously, you rate Spider-Man, but didn't rate the character. And I think that was because we got so used to having 3 films with Tobey Maguire and then a quick reboot into Andrew Garfield, bringing a different perspective. You know, it's been a fair few years since The Amazing Spider-Man first came out to Spider-Man No Way Home. So there's been enough time to, you know, give that gap and give that break. But I'm the same with you in terms of Tobey Maguire. I thought the first 2 films were excellent. The third one with Sandman was abysmal and just wanted to be forgotten. But what I will say this, Andrew Garfield really convinced me about him and sold me in his portrayal as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. I thought he was genuine. I thought he was funny. I thought he was comedic as and when he needed to. Arrogant, which is, you know, something quite like that portrayal of it. And it's something that actually I've now want to go back and watch The Amazing Spider-Man again to give it another chance.
And here's the thing. Let's be honest. No Way Home makes the previous movies better.
Oh god, yeah.
Just by being what it is, it makes the other movies better. Going back to what you were saying there, if I had one criticism of that movie, it's that there was too much comic relief from the other Peter Parkers at times. I think it was slightly overdone in places. I think they probably could have eased off it a little bit, but it's a minor quibble. You know, again, I might watch those previous Spider-Man movies and say, well, actually, the humor is quite in character. It's been a long time since I've seen them. I'm not going to lie. So, but the one thing I was getting at just now, what I was saying is, for me, Andrew Garfield was the MVP of that movie, without a doubt. He showed, probably in the very few scenes that he was in, more emotion and more genuine hurt and upset than what I think anybody really could have expected. You know what I mean?
I think when he starts referring to Mary Jane and the loss of Mary Jane, that's when it really came out, and you could kind of see the darkness and what he'd gone through. You look at them and you look at the three different incarnations, and you've got to go, Tobey Maguire is the Uncle Ben, isn't he now? He's like the maternal father figure of the two Spideys. Then you've got the older brother in terms of Andrew Garfield, I'm there as a shoulder for you, but really, I'm going to go and do my own thing. And then you've got the youngster. Then you've got the young Peter Parker, the rookie, the one who's still very raw emotion. And there's that couple of looks that they give them, that they both give each other, Garfield and Maguire give each other, when he's about to beat the Goblin at the end of the movie, and they pull it back. But you can see his journey throughout this film as well, where he grows and he makes that ultimate sacrifice, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's that stewardship, I think, from those two. Without those two, this film would not have worked.
Yeah, absolutely. They were, they brought a lot of heart to the movie, a lot of heart to it. Now, you talked about that fight on the Statue of Liberty at the end. Did you notice a few little hints and nudges to other things in there?
No.
So one of the big things for me was the fact that they were fighting on Captain America's shield. It fell down from the statue. They were putting the shield up on the Statue of Liberty. It fell down at one point in the movie. That's where they're scrapping at the end. But Peter Parker, Tom Holland, is about to obviously end the Green Goblin at one point. And he does it the same way that Cap put Iron Man out of action in Civil War, and the same way that John Walker killed someone in the
Falcon
Soldier. He's just got this big, jet thing, like the board, and he's about to bring it down on him. So obviously that was also a tie-in, because that's how May died, with being, hit with the glider, as it is.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was some really, really nice synergy with the Captain America side of things there. I mean, there's so many nods to Captain America in these movies as well, like Steve Rogers the musical and stuff like that. It's brilliant. Really
that's in the Hawkeye series, isn't it? The opening episode is that with Ant-Man.
But if you see all the billboards and stuff when Spider-Man's swinging around at the beginning, they've got the Steve Rogers the musical posters up and everything.
This is the one really clever thing about Kevin Feige and Marvel, is they don't miss anything, do they? If they sew something into the TV series, they will find a way to weave it in to every other property that they have. And you got to think, I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, we're now in phase 4 of the MCU, right? They already are planning phase 5, phase 6 in terms of the TV series, in terms of the movies. You imagine how in depth that planning and that story arcs have got to be to make sure that She-Hulk fits in with Loki 2, that fits in with Falcon, which fits in with Miss Marvel, that fits in with the man we're going to talk about in just a second, Charlie Cox, Daredevil, that fits in with everything else that they're doing, and the multiverse, and the Guardians, and Thor, and Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever, and Eternals, and the potential of the Fantastic Four and the X-Men joining at some point in the next 2 phases.
You've got to believe that. You've got to believe that somewhere in those Walt Disney offices there is the biggest timeline you've ever seen, where they've got little notes of where films and stuff are all fitting in next to each other, so that nobody gets confused as to where it's going.
Do you know what one of my big disappointments was? When you talk about tie-ins, that Julia Dreyfus wasn't in the film, because that's been an underlining pin throughout some of those series, is Julia Dreyfus and Madam Hydra.
but as yet, I mean, wouldn't that have been shoehorned? Let's be fair.
Possibly.
It wasn't relevant.
Possibly.
It wasn't relevant,
Possibly.
and I'd rather it not be there than it be there, but be completely irrelevant to the story. I could get it potentially as a post-credit scene, but yeah, I don't think it was essential. What I'd love to see more of is, and you just mentioned this, and it would be rude to talk about this movie without mentioning it further, and that's Charlie Cox's Daredevil,
Yeah.
or Matt Murdock, as the case may be, because we don't see him suit up. Obviously, there's the reveal recently with Hawkeye that Vincent D'Onofrio is also back as the Kingpin. Whether or not these are direct continuations from the Daredevil TV series, this remains to be seen. You know, with the multiverse idea, it could just be the same people but different backgrounds. I hope not, but either way, I'm happy.
I'm just going to go to a comment that's come in the chat room from Head of Steel, who's watching on Twitch, who's saying, I would love to see that timeline. So would I. Can you imagine the size of the office in the House of Mouse for that?
Yeah,
How much
absolutely.
wall space would you need in order for that to kind of be done? You know, going back to your point about Daredevil and Kingpin, I don't think they will be different. You know, I think that there's been a hint in the Spider-Man film, which is making it the same continuity. And what I love is the fact that the Brit came in and he caught it. And that
Peter's
was it.
reaction. Whoa.
How did you do that? Have you been bit by a spider? I was waiting for him to kind of turn around and say.
So let's be fair. The whole idea of the superhero origin story is a little bit rote these days, isn't it? It's done. You know, they've proven with Spider-Man that if people are aware of the character, you don't need to do an origin story to make that character work. You know, they've dropped in drips and drabs of Spider-Man's upbringing, of his history, etc., through various bits of exposition. You know, like Tony Stark when he was showing him the YouTube videos of this dude in the costume, like stopping cars and stuff. That was all they needed to do to set the scene of who this Peter Parker is. You know, they did a wonderful job of that. If you can avoid doing an origin story, avoid doing it. We've seen it, we've done it, we've been there. You know, who wants to see? And this is, potentially a knock at the upcoming Batman movie, which I've told you in our various conversations before that. Sadly, I'm not all that interested in at the moment.
Now that is a massive shock, because you go back a year to when it was all being talked about, that was all you were raving about, was what the Batman film was going to look like, you know, with Robert Pattinson and taking it back to the beginning and a whole new spin on it. And I was where you are going, nah, I don't think so. Now we've reversed, because the trailer that they showed at the film, I messaged you and went, it looks fantastic. I really want to see it.
It might be overkill. 3 trailers later and I'm bored with it. Honestly, bored with it.
That doesn't
where will we
say
go
a lot.
with this?
I don't know. We're just doing a random conversation.
You knocked me off.
Origin stories.
Yes. So that's another reason. That I'm, that I'm not that into the Batman side of things, because you got to believe that they are going to pick up the origin story somewhere along the line. There's talk that his bat symbol is made up of pieces of the gun that killed his parents and so forth and whatnot. So it is what it is. Fine, whatever. But who needs to know it again? Nobody. Everybody knows how Bruce Wayne became Batman. Everybody knows what happened. The same goes for Spider-Man. And at this point in time, given how popular that TV show was on Netflix, everybody knows who Daredevil is at this point. And if you don't, go watch the show. You know, it's a great TV show.
It wouldn't surprise me if the House of Mouse buy back the rights. You know, just like Paramount have bought back the rights to Star Trek across international distribution. It wouldn't surprise me.
What a shit show that was.
Well, we'll talk about that another day. It wouldn't surprise me if they did buy the rights to Daredevil, Jessica Jones, The Defenders, hopefully not Iron Fist, because it was totally shocking, and The Punisher and Luke Cage. I mean, they're the ones who are rumored to be coming in. Bring those series to Disney Plus and put them on Stars. You've then got that entire that entire universe, really, haven't you? Now,
absolutely.
two things I want to touch on, if we can, and we've kind of skirted around it, so let's talk about it. The villains. Now, they picked quite possibly the best villains out of the films. William Dafoe as the Green Goblin, Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, Jamie Foxx as Electro. You had the Sandman as well. What was your take on the villains that they brought back to these films?
Awesome.
To this film?
Awesome. Flat out awesome. So let's be fair. Green Goblin, the original, in more ways than one. And I'm going to correct you on this. It's Willem Dafoe, not William.
Oh, I thought I said that. Sorry, Mr.
No,
Dafoe.
you said William, but that blew my mind the first time someone told me that as well. I always used to refer to him as William Dafoe, but it's not Willem. But he is such a versatile actor. It is unbelievable. And he showed some serious chops in that movie. And the fact that he's gone on record as to saying that he was only going to do it if he was allowed to do his own stunts. You ballsy bastard. You know what I mean? At the age that he's at, that's just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And he did. He put in a fantastic performance. Electro was the biggest surprise for me, because I actually didn't mind his character in this one, and I've already gone on record as to saying I didn't appreciate who he was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think the digs about having to watch where you fall were fantastic, because obviously he fell into the vat of eels, and then the Green Goblin fell into something else, and that's why they turned into who they turned into, etc. So there was a lot of in-jokes there, and I really appreciated that. Sandman, that was an interesting choice, because he wasn't necessarily really a villain,
No, he was someone who had suffered his
straddled
own.
the line. The one thing that turned him into a villain at the end of the movie was the fact that he just wanted to sod off home.
Yeah, and is that bad?
No, not really. But then the best villains are always the ones that aren't necessarily bad; they're just misunderstood.
Thanos.
That's something I've always enjoyed. Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. It's still, no matter how often I see it, I'm still blown away by the technology that Marvel use and Disney use to de-age people. When they first used it for Tony Stark in, I believe it was Civil War, actually.
It was, yeah.
That absolutely floored me, and it's just getting better and better all the time, to the point where Alfred Molina, you would not have known that he'd been de-aged in that movie. No. You would not have known. And the first scrap on the bridge, when Peter's trying to get his MIT results changed, when there's fighting on the bridge and you've got the tentacles going everywhere and everything, I just loved it. That was the point where I was like, yeah, this movie is cool. As if I wasn't there already.
It took me back to 2002. It really did take me straight back. In fact, I forgot it wasn't Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man at that point, because you just got engrossed and you remembered, like you said, when you watched it as a kid and you've grown up with these films, and God knows how many times we've sat there and watched Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 with Maguire and the iconic kiss with Kristen Dunst. But you just forget and you get drawn in. And I'm looking at my brother-in-law going, how this is I'm a kid again. And yeah, it was fantastic. It was a great choice. It was just like being a big kid. Sorry, I keep going back to saying that because that's what it was. It was just like Christmas Day coming once at that point. Now, one other point that I want to touch on is the future of the characters, because we know now that Tom Holland is signed for another trilogy of Spider-Man films. That's been released. His comments were apparently taken out of context when he said he didn't want to portray Spider-Man anymore after these three. We also know that in this story, nobody knows who Peter Parker is anymore.
Okay, so I'm going to chop you off for a minute there. First of all, Daniel Craig is evidence that you can say that you never ever want to play a character again and still come back when enough money is offered to you.
Yeah.
It's got to be said, for the amount of money that they're getting paid, I would play whatever they wanted me to play.
Yeah.
I would do my own stunts. absolutely right. I probably wouldn't be very good at them, but I would try. Anyway, I'm glad you touched on this, and this conversation is something that could probably, in all fairness, go a whole other hour. You know, there's a lot to unpack in regards to the ending of the film, and let's get something straight. The ending of the film was my favorite bit. Out of all that happened, in that movie, the end was for me that punchline, that culmination of everything that's come in. That was it, because what the ending of that movie did was it signified that Peter Parker's just grown up.
Yeah, he's come of age.
I'm going to go into that in a little more detail. So, first of all, again, you know me, you know I like my dark, my depressing. I'm a big fan of tragic endings. I don't like anyone to have a happy ending, because if I can't, then why can you? And in all fairness, no, I'm only joking. I just like.
Can I just say, scrap what we said at the beginning. If you want him to come back, it's got to be lighter.
No, if I love tragedy. One of my favorite TV shows, and I know Ben Allen was scheduled to appear today on this as well, and he hasn't. And it's a shame, because I'm going to touch on probably his favorite TV show of all time, which is Bucky the Vampire Slayer. One of my favorite shows as a kid, and the reason I loved it so much was because of the dynamic between Bucky and Angel. You know, he's this tormented vampire, and he's found someone who loves him, and it's a woman who's supposed to kill him because of what he is. And then the moment they hook up, he turns into this evil vampire, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden he's trying to kill her, because it's a lot better than I'm making it out to be right now. But yeah, it's just this really tragic thing. You've got this almost unrequited love thing going on, and that they can't have each other, they can't be with each other, but still they're painfully in love, and it's great, and it sounds sappy as hell, and I get that, but I love it. I'm a sucker for that sort of thing, absolute sucker. So go on.
I was going to say it's a quite Shakespearean, really, isn't it?
Very, and I'm big on Shakespeare. I really do enjoy Shakespeare, so yes, it is Shakespearean in that respect. So you can imagine when the ending of the movie comes along, and in order to fix things, everyone needs to forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. You know, I mean, I'm sure you can pick holes in the logic behind that, and you could certainly pick holes in the, well, what's his social security number? How does he even exist? How does he make a living? How's he gonna, you know, get on a payroll anywhere, etc., etc., etc.? Forget it. I don't care. It's fiction. I'm not bothered. What I'm bothered about is the fact that they end this movie with literally nobody knowing Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Nobody, not anyone. That's great enough. And I thought, actually, this is a brilliant place to end it. You had that exchange between him and MJ, where she says, "You come find me, and you make me remember." And he goes to find her, and he gets his coffee, and he slips and trips on his words, and he decides to do nothing. And he decides to do nothing because ultimately he knows that by keeping Ned and MJ in the dark, he's protecting them. He is protecting them from everything they were at risk of in the first couple of movies. And his love for her at this point transcends the need to be with her. He just wants to protect her from everything, and that is more important to him than any kind of consummation of their relationship or any kind of, you know, actual relationship. She is more important to him than that. And I just thought that was utterly wonderful, because now wherever we go with this movie, with these movies in the future, wherever we go with them, he is carrying that pain with him. You know, that in itself has developed an untold amount of growth to the character.
So do we see now a more darker Peter Parker, a more chip on his shoulder, you know, because of that? But I mean, we'll come back to that in a second. I think going back to what you said, I don't see this being the end of these characters.
It's not.
MJ and,
in fact,
and Ned.
Thanks for saying that, because actually that's brought me on to another point that I took from the end of that movie. This isn't the end of those characters. In fact, this is the beginning.
Yeah.
Realistically, if you look at it, the whole situation, the whole Peter Parker with Iron Man, the criticism that was lobbied at the remake of the Spider-Man series by saying, well, actually, he's just Iron Man, version 2.
Mm.
He's just Peter Parker's little Tony Stark's little lapdog, etc., etc., etc. Now, that's just gone. That's completely erased. So he's got no access to Happy Hogan. He's got no access to any Stark tech. He's got no access to anything. He's just Peter Parker. So what this film has done is this film has taken a character that has been established as, a different hero to the one we all know, and they've just pressed the reset button, and they've just turned him into everything we do know. So at the end of the movie, we see him whip his way out of his, little apartment window, and he's in the traditional bright blue and red Spider-Man suit, the lycra that we're all used to, which you could argue that he got the inspiration from the
Garfield.
2 alternate dimension versions. Yeah, absolutely, which again is fantastic.
So,
but just a second. What we're seeing now is, did you ever watch the cartoon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're seeing now is that Spider-Man. So we've got a Spider-Man who is 19, 20 years old. So he's a young man. He's not a kid anymore. He's a little bit world weary. He's experienced. He's certainly in love with Mary Jane, who doesn't love him back at this point in time. So we've got that chase going on again, because that's going to come back, But we've also got him isolated. He's technically a villain to, the media in New York City and everything else. It just completely wipes the slate clean. Even the Avengers don't know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Nobody knows. Spider-Man is just Spider-Man. He is now as separated from everything as anyone in the MCU can be.
Which is going to make it very interesting, isn't it? If they do another Avengers, which they're going to do at some point, because apparently Doctor Strange is the new leader of the Avengers. He's the new most senior one. So Spider-Man obviously still exists. The world still knows Spider-Man. They know what he's done. Like you said, he's a villain, a good guy, whatever. When he's back with the Avengers again and he pulls off the mask, what's going to happen then?
Well, nobody's going to know. He's not necessarily going to pull off the mask. That's the point. Even in the comic books, not everybody knew. Very few people, in fact, knew that he was Peter Parker. Everybody expected something slightly different. They didn't know he was a kid, etc., etc. So, I keep him.
There's two things that I just wanted to come back to before we move on. The first one is the look that MJ gave Peter when he was doing that speech. When he walked out,
necklace on.
Yeah, and he
so
obviously
she's still wearing the necklace.
Still wearing the necklace. Referenced the cut on the head.
Yeah,
and she said it doesn't hurt anymore. But there's that last little scene when he walks out and the camera pans back to her, and you can see she's like, something is in the back of my mind. You can just
almost like deja vu.
Exactly. I know this person. I don't know. Something is familiar. Something's not. So it's there. So that for me is kind of indicating, we're going to continue with this. And of course, they're not going to let it go.
It's going to be the stereotypical. I say stereotypical. That sounds like a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It is going to be that there's a great storyline argument here for love conquers everything, even Doctor Strange's biggest spell. So I'm all in for that. I'll take that.
Let's talk about one other character, and that's Ned. Because out of
you mean Hobgoblin?
The Hobgoblin, yeah. Out of all of them in the 3 films, you talk about Tom Holland and Peter Parker growing. You talk about Zendaya and MJ growing, coming out of a shell and coming out of being this dark, like loner person to actually wanting to be with friends. Ned has developed from this geeky Star Wars building model Lego nerd to someone who is now able to wield the magic ring and open the portal, open the multiverse.
And they've already set him up as a villain because he said he wouldn't be. So of course he's going to be.
Of course he's going to be. So
because you need You need that tragedy in your life. You need it.
But
If
it's
you're
also,
go on.
but it's also, sorry, echoing Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, because it was the best friend.
Always has been in the Spider-Man series. Always
Yeah, I
has
know.
been. Even Dane DeHaan in how can I remember his name and not J.K. Simmons? That's ridiculous. But
He's
yeah,
old.
he was in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, I believe, as the one of the goblins, be it Hobgoblin. I think it was Hobgoblin. But again, the friend, and that's always been part of
Yeah.
the Spider-Man thing. They're just twisting it and turning it around a little bit. Same as they turned Uncle Ben into Aunt May this time round. They're changing, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ned is actually in the comic books as well. But I'd need fact checking on that one.
So it's going to be interesting. Go on.
No, I was just going to say I'm pretty sure that he is the Hobgoblin in the comic books too.
So it's going to be interesting where we go with Spider-Man. It's going to be interesting where the MCU goes, because we know the next film now is Doctor Strange and the Madness of the Multiverse. We know that Wanda is in that film as well. And we know it's good Strange versus bad Strange. So what else are you expecting from Doctor Strange and the Madness of the Multiverse?
Nothing.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know why?
No.
Because this is going to be another WandaVision situation. That's exactly what you're going to get from this. We're going to have another Mephisto. Oh my God, Mephisto's going to be the villain. Mephisto's in it. Mephisto's in it. Mephisto's in it. Guess what? He's not, and you're disappointed. And yeah, we knew it. So that's where we're going to be with this. Everybody's expecting everyone and his dog to turn up. There's talk of Chris Evans turning up as the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four. There's talk of Hugh Jackman turning up as Logan. There's all sorts of talk about these things, and don't get me wrong, are they out of the realms of possibility? No, not at all. They could happen. The properties are owned by Fox. The actors will probably get paid an exorbitant amount of money to do a 15-second or 30-second scene. Again, I'd be all in for that. Who wouldn't? It finally ties these characters, and Hugh Jackman, I'm looking at you. It ties these characters into the bigger Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. And I'm not being funny, but let's be fair, who doesn't want to acknowledge Wolverine, Hugh Jackman as a part of the MCU all day long? All day long. But I'm not buying into any of that at this point in time, because I don't want to be disappointed coming out of it.
Well, we'll have to see what happens when it comes out, which I believe is May.
I think people are looking in the wrong places for what they're going to find from this film. Do I think that they may reuse snippets from Fox movies to create some kind of view into another world or another dimension or another area of the multiverse or whatever else? Yes, I think they could. If Strange is doing something and there's a portal opens or something, you could potentially see the X-Men fighting one of the Sentinels from Days of Futures Past or something else. Yeah, maybe that could happen. But for my money, I think that the focal point of the Multiverse of Madness, rather than being Fox properties or Chris Evans making a cameo as a different character, I think you're going to find that they're going to lean on What If.
It's going to be interesting. And I'll tell you what is. Go for
it. If you're going to see cameos of any sort, I think you might see a Captain Carter, a live action Captain Carter. I think we've already seen in the trailer that Strange is fighting the Shumagarath, I think his name is, the big tentacle monster that we saw in the What If series. You said yourself, we've got the Dark Doctor Strange. Those are the things that I would think that this is going to pull in from. And it wouldn't necessarily surprise me, dare I say it, and this might be controversial, I don't want it to be, but it might be. I wouldn't mind betting that when this was in production, there was possibly the thought process of Chadwick Boseman appearing as some kind of Black Panther Star-Lord, because, that was probably the best episode of What If.
It's going to be interesting where they go, but One comment has just come in, and I want to get your pick on it because I think it'd be great. Head of Steel again on Twitch. Wouldn't it be a hoot to have an Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie where the Fantastic Four show up? Now there is a petition going on at the moment, isn't there, to try and get Garfield to come back for another Spider-Man film?
Yeah, and that's something I'm glad we've touched on actually. So thank you for that. There's a lot of rumors about the Amazing Spider-Man 3 and this, that, and the other. And I've got to be honest, where we're at the moment, you'd be remiss if you didn't mention the Spider-Man cinematic universe at this point in time, or the Sony whatever they call
the
it.
SCU.
Sorry?
The SCU, not
Spider-Man Cinematic Universe or something.
Spider-Man Cinematic Universe, yeah.
You'd be remiss if you didn't mention that, because obviously we've got Morbius, which, breaking news, I don't know if anybody knows this yet or not, it's been delayed until April. That was due out this January. In fact, it was due out in about 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's been delayed by 3 months. It's now the 1st of April.
Makes you wonder what's going on with that film, because it makes you wonder why. Yeah, so there's something wrong there.
Is there?
Or is it just...
Well, there's some last-minute alterations going on. So the one of the big rumors and the big hot topics at the moment is Andrew Garfield picking up again as Spider-Man. Now, if anybody's followed Andrew Garfield, they know that he's in love with the character. He was devastated when he lost out Spider-Man 3 to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and so forth and whatnot. Devastated by it, so it's no surprise that he came back. Given the reaction that a lot of people have had, now I've said myself that I think he was the MVP of the movie, and I do, and I'll stick to that. Would I want to see an Andrew Garfield-led Spider-Man movie going forward? Yeah, absolutely I would. But the problem there is you're potentially risking oversaturation of your brand.
Well, I was about to say, I mean, also, how can you have two Spider-Man films in the same sort of era? Do you know what I mean? So you've got Tom Holland and you've got Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, but you'd use different universes, wouldn't you? Sony would then direct theirs towards Andrew Garfield's universe rather than
it's a bit like Star Trek, though. You wouldn't have the Star Trek Abrams timeline or the Kelvin timeline airing at the same time as what the Prime timeline is airing. It would just be too much continuity error, too much confusion. What if they did an Andrew Garfield series?
No. I don't. My take on it, I think in a lot of ways you're right. I don't think it would be the best version. And I said this due to brand saturation of having an Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie. Would I want to see it? Yes. Do I think it would be a good idea? Not really, in the sense that it would confuse matters to the casual fan. So I'll pitch a different idea. What about having Spider-Man as an additional part to all of his villain movies? So rather than being the headline character, he's just a vital part of those movies without being the headline. So Venom 3 with Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy, not Tom Holland.
Have Andrew Garfield in that? How do we know that he doesn't exist in that universe? And that for me would be fun. The one thing that's got me really confused is Morbius, because there's nods in Morbius to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's nods to the Amazing Spider-Man universe, and there's nods to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man universe. So where is it set? When is it set? What is the score? What's the situation? Who knows? I was looking forward to finding out this month.
Maybe you've answered your own question, and that's why it's been delayed by so many months. Because I genuinely don't think Sony and Marvel appreciated the reaction that Garfield was going to get. I think Maguire, they knew he was going to get a great reaction, but I think they really underestimated the audience love for Andrew Garfield coming back and the way he's put himself across in this film. And that's part of it, is the way he's put himself across in this movie.
I also think, and you hit the nail on the head there, I also think that the reaction that he's got is in no part down to anyone else other than him. When he came in and he was talking about you know, how he let himself go in regards to villains. He clearly killed guys. Clearly, you know,
Yeah.
once Gwen died, he went off the rails.
Yeah.
That emotion, the raw emotion that Andrew Garfield showed in those scenes was just absolutely heartbreaking. You know, the scene where he's talking about MJ on the roof, not MJ, Gwen on the roof, and that he couldn't save her. You know, he refers to her as his MJ. And then we flash back to that at the end when MJ falls and he zips down and catches her, and he's almost in tears, you know. And the
That's it.
acting, Andrew Garfield literally had my eyes welling up more than once in that movie. And
But that's his redemption arc.
Yeah, that's what
That's
won people over.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What a film! What a film! So
I've said it before, and your big question, just to cap this off a bit, you were going to go back to this, weren't you?
I was going to, yeah. See, you can tell we've done this before, can't you? Hey?
Indeed. So your question at the beginning of the show was: is it the best Marvel movie of all time so far? My answer to that is it depends. It depends on your
giving
investment.
straight answers, do you? You really don't like giving straight answers.
Where's the fun in that? It depends on what you take from it and what you've taken from previous movies. You know, if you, like us, grew up with Tobey Maguire, went through the cinema with Andrew Garfield with the ups and the downs, and followed the cinematic universe from the beginning to where we're at now, yeah, you're damn right, it's the best Marvel movie so far, without a doubt. You know, not in my mind. I left the cinema there thinking, my God, what have I just seen? You know, because of the history. You can't create history like that, because ultimately any attempt to create it is going to feel forced and it's going to feel rushed. Nobody plays that kind of a long game where you've got to tie into a movie 20 years later, not without forcing it, you know what I mean? So to, you know, to have that come to fruition now at this point, it is literally every fanboy's dream result. And that's what we had. That's what we experienced. Everyone was talking about it long before it happened. Oh, multiverse. Let's do, you know, like Into the Multiverse live action. Oh, it's Sony and Marvel. I bet they won't. Blah blah blah. But they did. They did, and it was just as great as anyone could have expected. So yeah, if you have that background, if you have that investment into those characters, yes, absolutely, best Marvel movie to date. If you're a casual fan and you're not necessarily quite sure who that one is, but you knew the other one, maybe not.
One last comment before we begin to wrap it up. The credit scene, Venom.
Yeah, loved it.
Is that teasing us towards something, do you think?
Of course it is. Of course it is. Now, you mentioned earlier on, started me off again. You mentioned earlier on about whether we're going to see a dark Peter Parker. You certainly might see a Peter Parker that's, you know, racked with guilt and certainly some kind of indecision about how to go about his situation with MJ. Because let's face it, he's going to be pining, absolutely pining as a character, knowing this woman is just there, but knowing that what's best for her is not what's best for him. You know, so that's going to lead to some resentment. He's isolated. He's got no friends, no family around him. You know, Aunt May's gone, Ned's gone, MJ's gone, the Avengers have gone. Nobody else exists to him anymore in that respect. He is as isolated as they come. So that's where the symbiote comes in my opinion, because it's gonna, let's be fair, Venom feeds on those kind of feelings, those kind of experiences, etc., that kind of aggression and anger and stuff. It's written itself.
It's going to be good. We're going to have to wait to see what happens. Jay, thank you for joining us to talk Spider-Man. I've really enjoyed it. It's been like the old days.
To be fair, I just feel like I've been yabbering on and on and on. You ain't even said all that
much. That's normally what happened on Two Men, if you remember, right? You know, or you just told me to shut up. But there we go. Right, that's it for this edition of the Retro Chat podcast. Next week, are we going to be live? I don't know. We might be, but our topic for us is going to go back into the vaults of Star Trek, and we're actually going to look to season 6. We're going to look at the two-parter from The Next Generation called Chain of Command, which was known for how many lights did Captain Picard see. We're going to talk all about Chain of Command. There were 5 lights. And we're going to show you and tell you more about a project we teased on Christmas Day during Blackadder, which is called Star Trek Through the Lens, where we're going to be taking an in-depth look at every series, every movie, right the way up to Picard, Discovery, and Lower Decks over the remainder of this year. So we'll be talking more about that next week, and of course, Chain of Command. If you've got any memories, any thoughts, any comments, any criticisms, or anything about what you've heard tonight on this edition of the Retro Chat, tweet Jay. If it's anything positive, tweet me. And we will give that feedback to you next week. Plus, if you've got anything you want to know about Chain of Command, let me know on social media by joining us at all of these lovely places: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch, Retro Chat Podcast, and tweet us at Retro Chat Pod. Been a pleasure, my friend, to have you back.
Likewise.
Look forward to the next one. Look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. It remains to be seen what one that'll be, but either way, I'm looking forward to it.
Wow. We'll get one booked in.
It's been a pleasure being back on board. Thank you for the invite. My
pleasure having you back. Right. For Jay and for me, we will see you very soon. Until then, stay with me. We will see you right here next week on the Retro Chat Podcast. Until then, bye-bye.